Hello Awakeners, and happy Easter. Today I wanted to share a story about my childhood home. It's a story about a small home with big trees and simpler times. It also will showcase how a home can shape a soul. At the end of the story, I'm going to reflect on how the spiritual meaning of the home shapes the soul through Rudolf Steiner's lens. My story is called The House That Raised Me. Both of my parents were pre-World War II babies. My father was born in 1924 and my mother in 1934. Both of them came from families whose parents settled land in Saskatchewan. They both grew up and lived with making do. When they were first married, they were able to rent an old farmhouse close to where my father's parents lived. This did not last for long before they were asked to move out. The old farmhouse was to be torn down. They lived in a house in town before they moved to my official childhood home. A one-bedroom house that many years prior my father had milled the wood to build this house. The original owner had approached Dad to cut the lumber. It was used as a granary, but built to be a home. The owner was building one room at a time until the house was built and he could afford to live in it. And this is how my home came to be. There was a kitchen, a living room, and a bedroom. When I was a little girl, there was an outhouse at back, and at the age of 5, my father installed indoor plumbing. The house was shaped like an L. When you approached our home from the quiet residential street, on the other side of the tracks from the rest of town, you would see this small wood siding house with the paint chipping, backed against the spruce trees that lined the property, and a wide open lot all around it. There were no flower beds. The yard was all prairie grass in the summer and snow in the winter. Dad was passionate about keeping the grass cut short and the yard clean. The bikes in summer had to be picked up and put away. Otherwise, it was an open area for us girls to make mud pies and be proud of ourselves that we could walk barefoot on the gravel driveway. When I was very young, our yard on the south side of the gravel driveway had many poplar trees. This memory is vague, but the memory of the stumps feels a little more concrete, like a single picture in my mind. The tree stumps seemed to be there for a few years. Did the earth digest them, or were they pulled from the ground? I do not know. But my father was a third-generation tree cutter, miller, and carpenter, and I trust that he knew what to do in these situations. We were surrounded by trees. Trees lined the front lots of most yards, and they went down each side of a lot as the property line. The spruce trees were big, grand, and strong. It felt like they had been there since the beginning of time. At the end of the lot were more poplar trees. As we grew older, my sister Eleanor initiated the building of forts. Dad offered her wood scraps, which we nailed into the trees. I think the trees enjoyed us playing back there, swinging on their branches and singing into their leaves. We had a deep, rich garden in the back. We commonly grew rows and rows of potatoes and carrots, as well as lettuce, peas, and we enjoyed raspberries and strawberries. I remember when Dad tried to grow cabbage and cauliflower. Bugs were an issue. He didn't know how to garden, but he was figuring it out. Our front step was a sheet of plywood in front of a wooden step. Just one step, not a series of stairs. There was a hook close to the frame of the door that held a chain for our dog Trixie. To the right, up high, there was a hole in the house where sparrows nested. We could hear them in the kitchen sometimes, shuffling to make their nest or the chirping of new hatchlings. The light that shone down overhead on the front step was old even in my day in the mid-1970s. An original feature with the house. It was a comfort to come home late and know the porch light was on, which also meant Dad, in my teenage years, was waiting for me to get home. The porch was a space of transition. In the winter, you felt held between the cold on one side and the heat from the annex stove in the kitchen from the other side. In summer, the porch was a whirlwind. It was the place you ran in with your shoes on and the wind following behind you. The wood for our annex stove was stacked and stored in the porch. Above the wood was our broom and metal dustpan. We needed a metal dustpan because Dad used this pan to clean the ashes from the wood stove. Once I threw the dustpan accidentally into the stove after sweeping the floor. Dad was thankful it could be saved. Our fridge and freezer were also in the porch. It was chilly to go out there to get anything in winter. You tried to grab everything you could by only putting one foot on the floor and reaching for everything else, so you could get back inside into the warm kitchen as fast as you could. Our kitchen was truly the heart of the home. It was where we cooked, ate, did laundry, and in general hung out. The wood stove was to heat our home, but we had regular electric stove to cook with. Dad would sit around the table with his friends drinking coffee. My sisters and I would gather around the table looking at Sears catalogs for hours. We played board games and card games. We would bake. We would fight washing dishes. A lot of amazing things happened in our kitchen. One interesting thing we had that all of my friends did not have was a root cellar. There was a cutout in our kitchen floor in front of the wood stove, with a strong iron ring as a handle. We lifted up this section of the floor and climbed down a ladder into earth. This is where we stored our food. Potatoes and carrots were stored in the peat moss to the left of the ladder, and to the right was a shelf that held Mum's canning jars. The floors and walls were earth. As soon as the door was lifted, the trap scent of earth rose to greet us. I can still recall the feeling within my body with the scent. When I was young, the root cellar was a whole new world to me. As I grew, it became a place that filled me with a bit of dread. Once I was in high school, it was just a place. Now that I'm older, a mature woman, the memory of it is unique, and I feel blessed to have had the opportunity to have a root cellar under my home in my lifetime. Spiders were common down there, especially around the inside of the door. Thankfully, the door leaned against the wood stove, so we didn't have to get too close to it as we climbed down the ladder. When in the root cellar, we would walk on wooden planks to get to the potatoes and carrots at the back. We would fill an old ice cream pail or bowl and carry them up the ladder for supper. Mom was the main cook in the house when I was younger. Our meals were simple. Only salt and pepper for spices, mashed potatoes at every meal but breakfast, and breakfast was most commonly cereal or porridge. Most often we had a large meal at lunch and ate lighter at supper. Where the kitchen was the heart of the home, the living room was in the center of the home. It was the corner of the L shape. Dad installed the bathroom in the living room when I was 5 years old, going into kindergarten that year. Prior to that, I had been accustomed to using an outhouse at the back of the property. The walls Dad put up and painted white. You could find my sisters and I dancing to Mom's Elvis Presley records and kissing the wall, pretending to be kissing Mr. Presley. We had a TV up in the corner of our living room, and for the longest time it was black and white, but at some point it changed to color. If we wanted to watch a movie, we had to go to Jerry's, a convenience store and gas station and movie rental place, and rent a VCR and a movie to watch. We didn't have a satellite, and we had 3 channels, and one of the 3 channels had been set up that it required you to flip a switch on the wall to get reception. When we watched a show, we piled on Dad's homemade bed in the living room. During the in-between years, from when I was in grade 2 until my parents' formal separation in grade 6, the house had shifted. Mom, Melinda, my youngest sister, and I shared a double bed. Dad had moved into the living room, first sleeping on a cot and later on a wooden bed he built for himself. So when we wanted to watch a show, we all piled onto Dad's bed and watched a tiny television up in the corner opposite us. The size of the TV didn't seem to matter in those days, or we were too young to care. In the early years, we could come home from school and know Mom would be found in the living room watching Young and the Restless. Occasionally in the evening, we were shushed quiet as she watched the Tommy Hunter show. We were not to make a peep. Dad told me once he wished he could have been a doctor. This seemed to fit with my young mind. I could see him being a doctor. He cared about people, and I know I always felt he could cure any pain or ache I had. We used medicine that I don't hear much about in my adult life, like Castoria and milk of magnesia and alcohol for growing pains. We had an extensive medicine cabinet. It was about 4 feet tall, and it was built onto the back wall on the other side of the bathroom. In this space was also a linen closet, a huge linen closet. We never called it that. A linen closet would have been too fancy a term for us. There was a spot for a desk and a chair, as well as storage for a vacuum. When us girls were getting older, Dad built a wooden door to use between the living room and the bedroom for privacy. It had a simple hook and eye to close. It wasn't colored. It may have been stained. It looked like wood. The bedroom was our sacred space as sisters. It is where we played games when we were supposed to be sleeping. One I remember the most is playing Hello Holly Hobby, I Got Your Best Friend, Bolly Bolly, and we would toss the ball around in the semi-darkness. Summer nights with the window open and hearing lawnmowers in the early morning made me feel one with nature. In winter time, we were cozy, all sleeping together. Gladys, my oldest sister, was on the top bunk, and Eleanor slept on a cot close to the window. The double bed my mom and youngest sister and I slept on was laying under the bunk bed. We had 2 dressers in the bedroom. There was a walk-in closet, but that was only used for storage. Dad would go in there to grab his suit if there was a funeral. Life is all about mud pies, games with friends, playtime with sisters, cooking and baking, sharing a meal, and taking part in household chores as a family. While I grew up poor, it was a beautiful childhood. I wouldn't change any of it. As I look back now, I see how much this little house was more than just walls and wood. It was a vessel, a symbol of something deeper. Rudolf Steiner said that the material world is not separate from the spiritual world, but a manifestation of it. This means that even the smallest house holds spiritual significance. Steiner teaches that we are born into conditions that help us grow, that the places and people we are born to are not random, but woven into our lives with intention. In that sense, my little home, built from wood my father milled, simple and practical, was a karmic companion. It shaped me. It taught me about warmth, simplicity, closeness, and making do. According to Steiner, spirit lives in matter. Our surroundings aren't separate from the divine, but an expression of it. When I think about our garden, the porch, and the heart-centered kitchen, they were more than spaces. They were the living language of spirit trying to reach me as a child. I was being raised by more than my parents. I was being raised by the soul of the house. Our outer world forms our inner world. That little house was where I learned to be close to others, where I learned reverence and responsibility. It was humble, but it was alive with meaning. We often think spiritual growth comes from big revelations and mystical moments, but sometimes it comes through the small things, the way a porch holds the heat in winter, or the sounds of birds nesting in a wall. I see that my childhood home wasn't just where I grew up. It was part of my soul's unfolding. Happy Easter, everyone. Take care.